Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, very, very good question.
Yeah, this is a very good question.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question.
Oh, that's a great question.
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah, that's a great question, Zanger.
It's a great question. It's a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Really good question.
Gosh, this question to me, I hate this question.
That's a loaded question. but okay.
I have quite the hat collection, don't I? I was just watching that and saying, well, there's a Seattle Kraken one. There's a Mariners hat. There's that hat. That's okay. I got Long Live Indies on today because that's why we're here. Indie Agency News. Our brief is very simple. Build the global home for independent agencies. Our mission is to serve independent agencies and the brilliant people behind them. One of those ways are 15-minute member sprints. Go to indieagency.news to learn about that. That's part of your membership. But really, the goal here is more visibility for independent agencies and more choice for marketers. I'm Doug Zanger, founder of this little schmutz, and super proud of the work that we are doing and building this community. We call it community as a service. There's software as a service, but we have community as a service. We're very excited for fall. We are starting to do some members only things. That's starting to come up as well. We're going to start getting back out on the road. Summer's over. So going to start getting back out on the road. But as you know, just about every week, we do a show every day. And Thursdays is all about work. And as I was explaining to all of our guests earlier, that was one of my favorite things to do when I was at Adweek and at the Drum, is digging into the work. And if you are a member, I want to talk about the work, but also you could talk about work from a year ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago. Good work is good work, and we can still learn from it. Just go to indieagency.news to learn more. But today we're going to a lot of different places today because we were in Cannes, and our members' Serviceplan for Anzen Health and also their partners at Raw Materials and Soberdogs put together something that is far beyond a campaign. This is really, really incredible, and it really proves out the power of great ideas and great partners behind it for the greater good. And what I'm talking about today is I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here. Is 855 How to Quit. And this is an incredible program to help people quit opioids. As everybody knows, there is a continual just huge issues and problems with opioids, especially in this country. And what we're going to dig into today is really like, let's just dig into this entire thing. So number one, congratulations on the win. But again, the statue is one thing, but behind it is something so incredibly important. And Tam, I want to start with you. Give us a little bit of an overview so that we can tee this up.
Yeah, I'm the privileged person to come in kind of at the ninth inning, where they had the whole team that's here on the phone had come up with an amazing idea of ultimately how we can save one life. But hopefully what you'll hear from the results is we saved a lot more. And so my job was to come in and amplify that, make sure we had their message in the right place with the most visibility that we could have so that we could ultimately save the most lives.
Yeah. So before we get started, I'm going to get into the brief. We'll get into the process and the creative. We'll get into the results and then lessons learned along the way. But I want to play this case study from Cannes so that people have a really good, strong understanding of what we're going to be talking about.
The opioid crisis isn't even close to coming to an end.
Every 6 minutes, someone dies from an overdose.
People have simply been prescribed something that kills them.
Addiction is just too strong.
I try to quit so many times, but then you have a pill in your hand and it's just...
855 How to Quit is a helpline that turns the object of addiction into a way out by using the mandatory imprint codes on opioid pills as phone extensions to connect those who struggle with those who manage to quit that very same pill.
Hi, my name is Brian, and I quit using Oxycontin.
Connected through the pills.
I know what you're going through.
The callers heard stories from real survivors.
I had a steady job, a husband, and a doctor.
3601.
How they got addicted.
Escaped is really everyone I knew had opioids in them. Yeah, OP. They welcomed me.
And how they quit.
12-step program saved my life. I want to let you
Followed by live advice from experts.
Treatment options near you are either the clinic.
The helpline was promoted through a nationwide integrated media campaign, with out-of-home and print ads placed in relevant environments, next to pharmacies and hotspots, and based on regional prescription data of pills. A film brought it to TV. A website contained all stories, more information and ways to participate, like sharing your own story. On social media, prominent survivors promoted.
You'll see these billboards popping up. You got to check it out.
And even joined the helpline.
Look, there I am.
The campaign reached millions, helping thousands to take the first step to quit.
Why has no one thought of this before?
Saving lives every day.
People out there, they need to call. It can save thousands and thousands of lives.
If I didn't have somebody helping me, I wouldn't be sitting here today. It's that simple.
855 How to Quit, helping America quit opioids, pill by pill.
I mean, undeniable. Let's start with the brief. Kyle, do you want to dig into this? You want to kick us off here?
Absolutely. As you mentioned a minute ago, Doug, the problem, the opioid problem, is just incredible in the United States. And that is the main focus, as Tam said, help just one person. But then the team behind this was digging into everything of how can we be, very effective. And my part of it was more to be, on the side of the people who've been through it as somebody in recovery myself, what things are working, what things help people, what things can really help connect somebody who's been through it with somebody who's, actively struggling at that exact moment, because this problem is not getting any better. Unfortunately, it's getting worse, and we need any and everything that could help people. And then the team started to develop some wonderful tools on how to actively find somebody at that exact moment who's struggling, connect them with somebody who is been through it and has the resources available too. And that's where the team came in to develop all the wonderful tools.
Right. And then Joanna and Wojciech, let's dig in a little bit more into the brief. Again, what Kyle's talking about is this is obviously very real. And the thing that he said that I think is really interesting is there are these moments. It's not something that is passive. Struggling with addiction can be a very active thing. And then saying, Kyle mentioning in that moment and having a tool in that moment. So walk us through a little bit more about the thinking, especially in the brief.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start. So there are all kinds of resources available to people struggling with addiction. There's an abundance of free medication and rehab, and this is a pervasive issue, and there are options available. But the way we approached this brief was, how can we get those resources to somebody at the critical moment when they need it? And to us, that was when somebody actually has a pill in their hand. So you saw that in the case film of somebody holding a pill, right, and our just the phone number shows up. I'll let Wojciech speak a little bit more to the design approach, but we wanted to show it in a really memorable way, using that number to letter mechanic, from when we all had flip phones.
Right.
And I would also add that in terms of the brief, this started as a CSR initiative by the client, Anzen Health.
Right.
But it really has blossomed into not only them promoting the services of, a lot of their clients are rehab facilities and treatment centers and things like this, but they're also demonstrating their wider commitment to the healthcare industry, and everybody else was able to get behind that message. And it's really been as Tam said, and as Kyle also said, just a huge partnership effort in everybody putting in what they can, and it's become much larger than the original brief, I would say, in an amazing way. But yeah, I'll let Wojciech speak more to how the design supported that.
Yeah, Wojciech, dig us into that, because now you have a canvas to work from. So what was the thinking in that process?
Yeah, I would say, like, from the first time we've heard about the project and the brief, what was amazing was like how simple and powerful the idea was, and I feel like from the moment we finished the first call, like, all we could think of is like, how do we tackle that, and like, what is the right way to approach the project, especially from the visual standpoint, like to how we can define the art direction and the overall look and feel, just to make it feel different and quite distinctive, but not to take away from the core message that we are trying to relate to the public. And I feel like I wouldn't say that the brief really changed over the time. It's like from the moment like we had the first conversation when we talked about the brief, and then the next meeting we spoke about like what we think could be the right art direction, like that tapping into the pharma, but not only extracting like the minor details that would make and elevate the work. Like it felt like it clicked for everyone, and in that sense, like it was so smooth that was really allowed us to like get going from the start. So like, I think one of the things when we look at the pharma aspect of that is like, how do you look at the receipt, and like what are the interesting elements of that, like how the bottle is orange and it becomes the dominant color, like how do you extract small things like labeling, tables, and all that. So it's not like really trying to elevate the pills itself, but just like extract the minor details that would make the work shine.
Yeah, and what I'll say here on the design side of it is the way that I'm looking at this, and obviously we're talking about a vastly different category here, is the level of impact and simplicity at the same time. And you see that in, like an Apple, for example. Apple does things very, very simply because then it's very, very easy to understand. And to Joanna's point, yeah, you know what? There are a lot of resources around, but people don't necessarily. So my point here is that there is just enough friction where it's forcing people to stop and think, oh, okay, but there aren't so many hoops to jump through or so much clutter that it feels like it's overwhelming. This is a very, very simple concept. So, kudos. number one. I mean, it's excellent design, but it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Max, anything to add more on the creative? You're on mute. I'm gonna unmute you.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
What I found most inspirational and inspiring about this project is, like, I think you mentioned it in the very beginning, the power and the gravity of a simple but great idea. So whoever we talked to, everybody was, on in the very first second. Everybody was on board and said, let's collaborate. And that was something, given the nature of my job. So on the one hand side, I'm supposed to make media more creative. On the other side, we're trying to be the sticky stuff between media and creation. So we use the power of media to empower a good creative idea and tell then compelling stories across multiple touch points. And that was something that really, like, everything like a sweet puzzle came together in this project. It was truly amazing to be a part of it.
No, and I think that, again, kudos to Raw Materials for just really, let me go back and share this again, because I do want to just walk people through this a little bit. Again, the simplicity of this, again, you have this, but then you have the stories. And so there's a really good logic to this as well. And again, this is all very, very, and again, you start sliding down, and then you see, oh, that's, yep, you see the imprints on there. And again, going back to this idea of just enough friction. Sometimes in what we do, we sometimes make it a little too easy for people. Now, the other side of it is, and that doesn't necessarily have impact. The other side of it is that we make it too difficult. But again, this idea of friction, just enough friction, and this education is just, again, it's getting to it's boom, 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 boom. And it's just very, very clear what's happening here. So what were some of those conversations? Because again, during this process, I'm sure you went through a lot of different ideas. You went through a lot of different ways into this. During this process, did you notice that that you were veering maybe too simply or maybe too complex? And how did you balance this? I mean, this page right here it's striking. I mean, it's striking, especially here, the potency relative to morphine. And you come down here and fentanyl, huge problem. Yeah, 100 times. So what were some of those discussions just to make sure that everything was tracking in the right direction, the right way of travel, shall we say?
Yeah. So I'll maybe continue my thought from the previous question. But I think also to piggyback on what you said, like the finding the right balance was definitely the biggest challenge of like what is the right amount of friction and what is what level of complexity or simplicity we want to achieve. It's like, as the designers and creators, we tend to go with like, oh, let's go broad, let's try to explore as much as we can, and it's like, I don't know, what would be the most interesting approach to it, like how we can push the boundaries of the design, and then you reach the moment when it's like, as we collaborate, like we all meet and chat, and then it's just like this feeling of like, are we really tapping to the right audience? And like, it's not the design community, we're not creating the ad for the pharmaceutical company, that it's meant to like actually do the opposite. And that was like the moment where we really started the conversation about the reduction of information, reduction of visual elements, just to get to the core. And that came through like an overly simplification of those tables that you mentioned, of like how we can push the number to be the most important aspect. And we knew that we want to make like the number be prominent. So how do you choose the typeface that would support that, and like how we work with the type founder Chimera that were nice enough to support us in that case, and like lend us their typeface and do some small adjustments that would help elevate the work even more. But I think the two sort of most important things that we talked about were like the use of pills, because they are not on the internet. Like you can find like very, very bad quality assets that you can't use, you can barely even reference. So we had to recreate all of that as the CGI. And with like the pure references, we struggled a little bit like to get the right assets. But then like with our 3D artists, like we were able to like get to the realistic enough effect that give a sense of like this is an actual pill. But we didn't want to make them feel too appealing or like to glorify the pill in a way, because that would also lead to quite the opposite effect. But at the same time, like one story that that kind of stayed in my head in the course of the project is like, we wanted to, when you are in the story page and we try to tell a story of addicted person, like we had this idea of like how the pill itself, that it's on the left hand side on the story, like the further you go in the story and you read the conclusion of the story, like we wanted to make the pill like kind of crumble or get distracted, and to show like in our head it could look quite beautiful from a visual standpoint, but again, like we talked about it a while, and then a visual representation of like crumbling pill and turning it into dust could lead to like quite the opposite effect, because that's what people do to get like a stronger effect of an opioid, like when you crushed it and snorted and all that.
Yep.
So that was like one of the things, like you want to do something striking from a visual standpoint, but it just doesn't feel right and the context is not right. So it's again about that reduction of the visual aspect to like get really to the essence and not try to sort of overblown all that to the public.
Exactly. Let's move into results. Based on that case study, the results were remarkable. Tam, walk us through, obviously those are big numbers and we are an industry that, loves big numbers, but I would argue that in this case, it's far more important to really have impact instead of us saying, woohoo, lots of numbers, which is great. But also, what were some of the other data points that pointed to success here?
Yeah, I'm going to let Joanna walk us through the numbers in a minute, but I think from a media strategy, what makes a successful, not just brief, but campaign is how do you connect with people? And so everything that we did with the media approach was about connecting and connecting at the right time. I mean, you saw some of the imagery where we had boards outside of a CVS, like we had boards that were meant to stand out and capture attention. We were talking about this as a team, and we had people that would stand in front of the creative and do a TikTok video and push it out to the world. Like, why do I care? Why do I share? People understood the importance. And I think the numbers, Doug, they really spoke volumes, because the surprise and delight we have for you today isn't the numbers that were demonstrated in that case. But Joanna, I think you should run through the numbers that we've actually seen today.
Yep.
Yeah, the numbers that you didn't ask for, but that I have. I'm really happy to share them.
Right.
Because I think in this case, it's so impactful to hear these numbers. So in the first 4 months, it's obviously been longer than 4 months now, but in Cannes, which you mentioned earlier, that's the yardstick that I had. We had more than 30,000 incoming calls to the helpline.
Wow.
And when you think about how much courage it takes to take that step, it's really amazing. And then on top of that, we had referred 5,000 people to treatment out of those 30,000. And then we had this statistic that compared to other helplines in this space, that's 35% more effective at that second step, which is the crucial one, right? Because peer support is incredibly effective at that emotional connection, taking away some stigma. But ultimately, we want to have people in the care of professionals and taking further action. So those numbers are really, really heartening. I would say also, we were lucky enough to be chosen as one of 4 PSA campaigns that are required by law in the US to receive free media space. So in addition to the great work that we were doing as a team to get these placements and use prescription data to put the right pills in the right places, and all of that was incredible work. But on top of that, we had partners like Outfront and JCDecaux and Clear Channel who gave, I think it was, I'm looking at my notes now, which is a faux pas, but $150 million nationwide in 2024 of free media.
Free media. Wow.
Yeah. And I'd love to just add, Doug, if it's okay. I think why it came together, we talked about collaboration. So those media partners were fantastic, but we also work with Talon, who really came to the table with us as like one team, one dream, and thought about how do we really demonstrate the impact? How do we get more people on board so that we could deliver over 100 million impressions? And we clearly eclipsed that. And so it really was about not just making sure that we had some impressions. It was, our ultimately goal, how do we save one life? But then how do we amplify that in a way that everybody was noticing? And I think the numbers that Joanna just brought us through, again, those were just after 4 months. So we know those numbers are bigger, but 5,000 people in to help. So it has blown us away in terms of what we were able to accomplish when we all came together.
Yeah, Kyle. I mean, again, the impact 35% more effective, but the job's not done yet. But it's also encouraging. What is encouraging to you? But also, where do you retain super focus on this?
To me, it's the specific connection with somebody. That's what I thought was the most unique part of this project. As somebody in recovery, when the biggest thing is identifying with somebody, doesn't matter whether it's a rehab program, a 12-step program, whatever, like the core that seems to be the thing that works so much is, wow, I identified with this person, I could relate. So calling in and having somebody who specifically, got through addiction with that pill that you're holding in your hand struggling was the most focused and unique part of this project. I thought was just brilliant and incredible. And then, as Tam and Joanna mentioned with the media strategy, I know it was really big to not just have some of these major companies, which were incredible, these media companies put billboards up, but how can we take that specific billboard or commercial or whatever the media was, and again make it more focused and personal with somebody? And that's kind of where they brought myself and others on, to where I'd stand in front of a billboard and make a TikTok, as it's not just the helpline. That's obviously what is the result. We want people to call in, but I'm a person, or who, the other folks that helped out, who is involved in this and in recovery, and my story's on there and I'm real, and you can call and relate. So are the other 29 stories on there. And that's a huge benefit nowadays too, with, as we all know, social media, and part of those well over, I believe it was, just in Cannes, it was 700 million or 600 million impressions. That number's sticking out. Joanna might know better than me, but the goal was 100, and we eclipsed that, as Tam said. But way more personalized with the social media, with all these people sharing it, and people know we're a real person who's been through it. It wasn't just a hired actor, or somebody brought on to promote a product. We're involved in this,
right? And listen, I'm always willing to share this with people when they ask. So I'm 18 years sober, and back then it was, it was one-on-one conversations, and I don't want to say it was, it was verboten or anything like that. There you go, Max, a little German for you. But what the things that I notice about this vis-a-vis what my experience was, again, always one day at a time, but successful outcome at that point, and then people learning about it. And then to your point, Kyle, I was able to share my story one-on-one with a lot of people who, said, oh, Zanger went through it, so you should probably go talk to him. But the quick immediacy of this, I think is really great. But again, it goes back to the very simple point that one-on-one interactions, whether it's somebody that you know or somebody that you're learning to know via the site, is probably the most critical thing, because there's empathy there. Absolutely. It's what connects us. Yeah. Just as you said. And, it was mentioned earlier with the kind of the friction. You don't want it too much. You don't want it too little. So that's why it was so simple with the back of the pill, or whatever the imprint code, because every pill's got a unique code. But there's that moment that as well as anybody, or many moments that happen, but it's a brief period where, we're struggling, we're doing terrible. And then there's that kind of, like, I always call it the 5-minute window. Like, I need to do something. I totally get that, dude. Yeah. And the problem is with opioids specifically, to me was that 5-minute window. If you get past it, because it's a substance where there's extreme physical withdrawal, if people can't connect in that window, they're going to unfortunately go back and use, because their body is screaming at them. Right. You have to. So that window was so important. Somebody has the pill, they're struggling, I really got to change. They could call, and within that 5-minute period, connect, hear unique stories with that pill,
depending on the time, connect exactly to, somebody who could talk to them. But then again, with the 5,000 people, which is more now, get help and get resources and really, go for that window.
Yeah. Max, I wanted, so a couple more questions for everybody here. So Max, I want to get into your view of the output, and as a creative leader, obviously it's outstanding, but what lessons did you learn during this process? What did you learn maybe personally? What did you learn professionally?
Yeah, maybe outcome in terms of results. I think I think is next to, like being a hybrid, we do like numbers, but on the other side, what I think from a media perspective was truly amazing is that usually a billboard is a one-way communication. You print something out and hang it up. And every single piece of communication actually became a conversation starter. So we saw people, like Tam mentioned, standing in front of a piece of communication, a billboard, and talking about it. And this is something that we saw, people talking about the website, about the stories, about TikToks, resharing TikToks. Like, it wasn't a broadcasting approach. It was, you put something out there, and then it became if you will, like a self-propelling flywheel of communication. And that, I think, is something, to be honest, you can't really plan for. There's a certain amount of luck to it as well. But this was truly, I think, one of the most amazing results of the media strategy, is that it worked so well. But in terms of, you mentioned, what did I personally learn? I think I learned two things. One is collaboration beats competition. Like, nothing great has ever been done by a single person or team or even a company. And this truly, I think, is a proof of concept that if so many different, because look at the credit list, there were so many people involved. And this is what made this project a great project. And the other thing is not a sad reality, but purpose is a never-ending story. We actually believe this was a very successful campaign. However, it's like, if you compare it to the numbers of people still in need, it's like it's a tiny drop in the ocean. And there's so much work still to do. And it's sort of a German word for you, ernüchternd, is when you put all your heart and sweat and work and time into this, and then the change you do, even though it's a little, it's totally worth it, don't get me wrong. But there's so much more to do. And it's a never-ending story. And that's what I find this encouraging, not motivating. I find this encouraging. But these are probably the two things I learned and took out of this project.
It's like being an Union Berlin fan. I'll just give you a little bonus. Never finished. There you go. Wojciech, your lessons you learned. What did you learn during this process?
I would say maybe personally, because me as a European, like, I only live in US for like a couple of years, but I remember I think it was like end of 2021, and I watched the Dope Sick, and I think this was the first time like I in some way interacted with the opioids, and I was like kind of blown away and perplexed, like how situations like that could happen within like the healthcare system, and like how all that can get abused for the purpose of profits and all that. So that also made me realize like sort of how lucky I am to like be healthy and sort of think that the opioids are not your problem. So I was also feeling quite grateful that be able to try to help solve the problem of the opioid epidemic. It's a good feeling. So I think that would also made me feel even better about the whole purpose. And then I would say that professionally, to kind of go back to what I maybe said earlier a little bit, it's like, as a designers and creatives, we often think about sort of the final outcome, not always in the through the context also of like what we are solving and who is on the other side of the receiving end. And I think like we try to, we strive for, let's use the newest technology, or like how we can leverage some trends and whatnot. But then at the end of the day, it's just like you have to look at the target audience. You have to think of like how quickly someone needs to get to the action, and maybe the work itself could defend itself due to the quality of the execution and like how well it's done. So I think those are like the mostly two things that I can think of.
Yeah. Joanna, over to you.
Sure. Professionally, I would say that this isn't a new lesson, but I was reminded of the power of really smart partnerships and working with the right people. I mean, Serviceplan, and then Tam mentioned Talon, and now you are a part of this conversation. And I mean, we just could not have done this without the passion, honestly, of the people involved. It wasn't just, okay, I'm showing up on Monday and I'm doing what I have to do. It was people who really put their best talent and their best people into something that has been really effective. So that was one good reminder / lesson. And then, again, on a personal note, I think I grew up a little bit as an Army brat, and I moved over and this crisis is really an American story. And so to be talking about this on an international level, being in Cannes, every American that I spoke to was like, oh, I know somebody who's been, or I lost somebody, or I personally have struggled with this. And it was just a lesson for me, because I, having moved so much, I guess, didn't realize how pervasive it is and how specifically American. And, we're in the middle of an election cycle. So it just brings up, a desire to want to do better and make a difference. And we're in the business of, a lot of the time with it being in the design world, we're making effective work, but it's not always to affect changing lives. A lot of the times it's to make something really beautiful, or to, we always have different reasons for our briefs. But on a personal note, it was nice to feel like we're doing something good with the work that we do.
Love it. Tam?
As I shared at our annual board meeting, when Max calls, pick up the phone. He's an amazing partner to me and everybody in our network, and often comes to the table with amazing ideas. On a personal level, and connected to that is, don't ever think you're too busy to not participate and collaborate. We have a busy day today. I'm the CEO of an agency. Like, my day is slammed always. But the effort that it took to amplify this was significant, but it wasn't significant in terms of the bigger picture. And so make time, because it is worth it. And I feel the joy about how we've been able, again, just to help one person, to help all the people that we helped, because we had the power to do it. And clearly the program has been a great success, and it's still live. Added value impressions that we've received from amazing partners to keep our message flowing, so that we can continue to help people out there.
Right. Kyle, what part of Italy is your family from, by the way?
Tuscany.
Oh, Toscana. All right.
Yeah,
we're Abruzzi, Calabria. So that's
okay.
My mom's side. So they say I'm half Italian. They say, what half? I say the good half.
I know.
How Italian is that? What did you learn? Max is laughing. He's like, yep, Italy. What did you learn? Because, obviously, people like you and I who have gone through this and are going through this, there are lessons we learn every day. But during this process, what did you learn?
So to me, the coolest thing about this is I'm in the recovery world daily.
Yeah.
Dealing with everything, unfortunately, that's going on out there. So what was so cool to me is my connection with this was with Serviceplan, mostly was my contact, and they have been absolutely incredible. But to get of kind of a view and be involved with everyone on here and everyone else involved in the behind the scenes, the design, all that separate from the addiction world, so to speak. I was just blown away at the amount of people involved, the amount of companies and agencies and nonprofit in the work that went into this. It would just, it's a side of some of this I don't see, the background work.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and just absolutely shocked and blown away with the number of people, the detail, the passion everyone put in, little examples of like a certain font didn't fit on one of the pills on the website. So instead of changing it, they contacted the person at Microsoft or whoever who developed that font to specifically redevelop and write something out specific. Just every detail was done to a T with all these, folks on the call and all the teams behind it. So that's a cool part of the world I don't always get to see,
right.
Being on the other side of it, so to speak. And then, of course, personally, this is just something that, to me, it needs to be talked about daily. I think, as you know, better than anybody, we get a little desensitized. It's been going on so long, and you turn on any news channel, opioids are not, a story. Overdose is not a story unless now there's a group where 10 plus people died in a batch. And it's like there's over 100,000 people a year dying of overdose now in this country. That's an insane number, and that's happening every year. And it just unfortunately doesn't get talked about enough, and doesn't get the focus I think it deserves.
Yeah. No, I would tend to agree with that. I would tend to agree with that. A brief moment of levity. Is this the year the Buffalo Bills win a Super Bowl? Is this the season? I presume you're a Bills Mafia guy.
I am not. I am actually not. No, I have respect for them being they're the home team, and I actually got to play in their stadium in high school.
Oh, okay.
All right. I definitely have some respect for them, but I'm actually a Dolphins fan.
Oh, God help you. Okay. Well, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, so go figure. One quick question, and I always love asking this question. And Joanna, I want to kick this one over to you. How do you sell in work? What advice would you give to other independent agencies about selling in work, especially work this bold? What advice would you give people?
This is such a personal question in a way.
Interesting. Okay.
I think, because I think there's definitely best practices, but at the end of the day, everybody's different. For me personally, I love people, and I really try to know who I'm talking to on I'll look them up, right? Like I'll look at their LinkedIn, where did you go to school? Because I think the people I work with make good work, period. Mm-hmm. So it's more about, for me, connecting with the person that we're selling in work to, right? Like how do we connect, and how do we assure them that I'm going to be a good partner, and that I'm going to be able to talk to them and tell the truth. And so that's what I would say for me personally.
Cool. Love it. I'm going to have everybody hang out backstage, but thank you all so much for joining us. I love that we went pretty deep here, and hopefully people learn a bit. So as professionals in this industry, learning the importance, as Kyle pointed out, dotting the T's, or is it crossing the T. I always get that back. Dotting the T's and crossing the I's. Why not? That feels on brand for me. But also just really, again, digging into the process and making sure that it's thinking over and over and over. Sometimes things move quick. Sometimes you got to slow it down, and everywhere in between. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Hang out backstage for me before we cut out. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. A reminder, tomorrow is Fun and Games. Look at me being not prepared. What are we doing? Oh, Liar, Liar. We have one of our, we have Pri from Opinionated in Portland. We're looking for we're actually looking for a judge on this one. So we're going to get that buttoned up. We'll have that tomorrow. Next week, we're going to have a bunch of other things as well, including our first members only session. Go to indieagency.news for that. We're going to be talking about account strategy with the fine folks at NOCO in Portland, Oregon. They were former Instrument executives, and they've been building a really great consulting practice. On behalf of everybody at Indie Agency News, thank you so much for your support, especially our members. If you want to learn more, go to indieagency.news. See you next time.